In at number 5, Annabelle. The Annabelle doll is the most prominent piece found in the Warrens' occult museum, trapped inside a glass case with a sign that reads, "Warning, positively do not open." This Raggedy Ann doll was initially purchased in a thrift store in 1970 by a mother looking for a birthday present for her daughter Donna. Donna, who was in college at the time and shared an apartment with her roommate Angie, loved the doll at first and took it home with her. Over the course of the next few days, Donna and Angie started to notice something odd about the doll. It seemed to move around the house on its own, never where they had left it, and it would change its position. One time they even found it standing on its feet. Then strange messages written on scraps of paper started to appear all over their apartment, looking as if they were written by a child. A bit freaked out, Donna and Angie called a medium, who told them that the doll was possessed by a little girl named Annabelle, who had died in their apartment building years ago. Annabelle told the medium that she liked the two girls and wanted to stay with them. The young woman allowed it, but much to their dismay, they would soon find out that Annabelle wasn't who she said she was. One of their male friends named Lou stayed the night at their apartment and woke up in the middle of the night to find Annabelle next to him, appearing to move. The doll then tried to strangle him, and the next morning he woke up to find himself covered in cuts and burns. This is when Donna reached out to a priest, who then brought in the Warrens. The Warrens discovered that the doll wasn't actually possessed at all. Instead, a demon was manipulating it, trying to get close to the girls in an attempt to possess one of them. No thanks. And at number 3, the PERRON family. You might recognize the PERRON family as the story that is depicted in the first Conjuring film. Now, back in January of 1971, the PERRON family moved into an old farmhouse, a 14-room building in Rhode Island. Roger, Carolyn, and their 5 daughters began to notice strange occurrences shortly after moving in, like missing objects, odd noises, and small piles of dirt appearing in previously clean rooms. The girls began noticing spirits around the house, most of which were harmless, but some were a bit more aggressive. Things got worse. The spirits would cause their beds to rise off the floor, and they would smell like rotting flesh. Carolyn researched the house and discovered that it had a long history of people dying from mysterious circumstances, with some hanging themselves in the attic and others drowning in the creek nearby. One spirit in particular, Bathsheba, was a spirit of a woman who lived on the property in the mid-1800s, who was a Satanist, and was somehow involved in the death of a neighbor's child. The Warrens visited the farmhouse multiple times, and on one occasion, Lorraine conducted a seance, which led to Carolyn becoming possessed and speaking in tongues. The family, due to financial strain, was forced to live in the house until 1980, but reportedly the hauntings had ceased by then. Up next, number 2, the Enfield Poltergeist. The Enfield Poltergeist is the story that appears in the second Conjuring film. In 1977, the Hodgson family, who lived in Enfield, England, began to see and hear strange things in their home, including a dresser sliding across one of the children's bedrooms. Toys would fly around the house and were burning hot to the touch. Loud knocking sounds shook the house, to the point where they had to call the police, believing that someone was trying to break into their home. The officer who came to the scene reported seeing a chair rise up into the air and move across the floor all on its own. Reporters from the Daily Mirror were also present at one point, and they claimed that they had also witnessed some of these strange occurrences. The situation really started to attract some solid attention when one day, the iron fireplace in one of the bedrooms upstairs was ripped out of the wall. Warrens came to the house and upon investigating declared that there was a demonic presence there. While the film depicts an almost exorcism, the real-life story is quite different. 2 years after the hauntings began, they abruptly stopped. And finally, in at number 1, Amityville. Even if you're unfamiliar with the specifics of this story, you've probably at some point heard the name Amityville in correlation with horror or hauntings. Amityville is a real-life place, approximately 30 miles outside of New York City. And back in 1974, a 23-year-old man named Ronald J. DeFeo Jr. murdered his entire family with a rifle while they slept. 13 months afterwards, a new family purchased the house, the Lutz family, who stayed there for 28 days before fleeing. The Lutz family claimed that their house was haunted by a violent spirit. After their first night there, the family began constantly getting into arguments. Their daughter started to spend all of her time playing with an imaginary friend named Jody. Awful odors emanated from all over the house, and black stains started to appear on various surfaces. Flies started to appear in one of the upstairs rooms that they had turned into a sewing room. George Lutz, the father, would always wake up at 3:15 a.m., the time in which the DeFeo murders occurred according to the police. Family members started to appear aged and would levitate, so finally they got a priest to walk through the house. But the family still continued to be terrorized. 20 days after the family left the house, the Warrens were called in to investigate. While they were there, Ed was violently pushed to the floor and Lorraine was overwhelmed by a demonic presence and saw the psychic impressions of the DeFeo family's bodies laid along the floor. Further research into the house revealed that it was actually the site used by a man named John Ketchum in the early 1900s who practiced black magic. They also captured an image of a boy peering from the second floor of the house. The Lutzes eventually sold all of their belongings, some to the Warrens, and relocated to California.
Number 5. Amityville. Believe it or not, there's actually 39 film adaptations made surrounding this case. Yeah, it's the OG case, the first crack at getting this terrifying formula down that we all love today. The Amityville Horror. Yes, the infamous haunting that took place on November 13th, 1974 at 112 Ocean Avenue, Amityville, New York. Well, in some versions 108 Ocean Avenue. Places like that get really popular, you know? The Amityville Horror is a book by American author Jay Anson, published 1977, and it's also the basis of one of the scariest movies ever released from 1979 onwards. The paranormal experiences by the Lutz family has just led to great movies, you know? Spooky stories. It unfortunately has also led to controversy, lawsuits, name defacing, and of course murders and life sentences. But that was before all the media stuff. Hey, it was gruesome times. The LA Times said it was actually more hideously frightening than The Exorcist because it actually happened. DeFeo was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 6 life sentences. All of his parole appeals have been denied. For nearly 13 months after the murders, the house remained empty until it was bought by the Lutz family. And cue terrifying movie. When the Lutzes moved in, the furniture from the DeFeo family remained intact from the night of the murders. Yeah, they actually didn't know. They just thought it came furnished. That's a ripoff also, I'd be pissed. New couch smell? Nope, just ghost plasma. Yuck. The Warrens' most famous case was the Amityville haunting. This is where 6 members of the DeFeo family were found dead in their beds in 1974. A year later, the Lutzes moved in, and 28 days of this, basically. Also, let us know in the comments down below which Ed and Lorraine case scares the bejesus out of you the most. Like, which movie won't you watch, you know? I don't do dolls, dude. Annabelle gets me every time, I swear to God.
In at number 4, the SMURL haunting. In between 1974 and 1989, a couple by the name of Jack and Janet SMURL, who lived in West Pittston, Pennsylvania, claimed that a demon inhabited their home. Jack and Janet began witnessing strange happenings, the likes of loud noises and bad odors. The torment continued to get worse. Their dog was thrown into a wall, their daughter was pushed down their stairs, and Jack claims to have been physically and sexually assaulted by the demon on multiple occasions. The Warrens didn't get involved in the case until 1986, and the reports were pretty disturbing. Ed claimed to see a dark mass form inside of the home, and that the temperature dropped severely. The demon even left them a message written on a mirror that read, "Get out." By 1987, the haunting had calmed down to an extent, with Janet telling reporters that they still heard knocking and saw shadows occasionally. After the SMURLs left the house, the new house owner told reporters in 1988 that she never encountered anything supernatural while living there. The SMURL haunting had generated a lot of press attention over the years, and there were a lot of doubts about the legitimacy of the SMURLs' claims.
Number 3. Bill Ramsey. Okay, so these Warrens have covered it all. Ghosts, demons, succubuses, even vampires. I'd love to see a good vampire movie, you know? Just Juan takes it into his universe. I'd love to see it. But werewolves? Like, for real? No way. In the 80s, they were fascinated with this werewolf legend, so Lorraine and Ed Warren traveled across the world in search of a real-life wolf man. They watched a television program, Sightings, in which police officer and locals got interviewed about their encounters with a local werewolf, Bill Ramsey, in London, England. Bill himself was questioned about his abilities to take on men twice his size with ease, as he would rampage through the city, blacking out. Lorraine felt a strange connection to him after this, and after a short trip to London, she found Bill Ramsey's whereabouts. Through British police departments, Lorraine made contact. Lorraine and Ed discovered that unlike most werewolf folklore, he does not change physically every moon, or it wasn't a bite that originally caused him to transform. Bill Ramsey, according to Lorraine, was possessed by an evil wolf spirit and needed help with a full-blown exorcism. The Warrens brought Bill back to Connecticut to meet Bishop Robert McKenna of Our Lady of the Rosary Catholic Church, and he agreed to perform an exorcism for Bill. The exorcism was a success, and thanks to everyone, today Bill lives a pretty normal life. I'd hope so. This is terrifying. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, if that came to theaters, it would probably slap and horrify at the same time. Good problems, you know? Number 2, Japan tour. In the mid-1990s, Ed and Lorraine found themselves overseas in Japan, visiting Nagoya and Tokyo with a team of translators for a small tour of where Ed was stationed in World War II. And of course, some hauntingly terrifying demonic run-ins. First day, they went to see these haunted tunnels. Second day, they have haunted house run-ins with headless samurai. And thirdly, they witness and help out with a full-blown exorcism. Yeah, talk about a busy week. It's like a Warren 3-in-1 package deal. Their first day consisted of visiting a set of condo buildings apparently riddled with a ghost infestation. Beheaded samurai soldiers haunt the hallways, a ghostly couple and the woman ghost of the gallows haunt the premises. The second night, they visited a haunted salt mine tunnel, Ed said it was the scariest place he had ever been to. The tunnel had buried some odd 200 people alive when an avalanche caved miners in. Ouch. The third night consisted of this. That's right, a very, very unsettling, real exorcism. Okay, yeah, I'm not sleeping tonight at all. The Warrens sat in on 3 high priests of knowledge and spirituality known as disciples as they watched an apparent snake demon slither its way out of a person before their very eyes. And of course, this footage of a young woman speaking in not her first language, but tongues. Just moaning in agony. It's kind of hard to watch, all that demonicness. Spooky level? 10 out of 10, 100%. And the number 1 spot, Maurice Theroux. And we come to Maurice. This one is terrifying on its own. It doesn't need a 3D movie follow-up. Maurice Theroux began to notice young. He was able to do things that no other man is capable of. Superhuman strength, knowledge of more than his academia showed. He was different. He worked around New England for years doing odd jobs and yet suffering through several relationships. After a physical examination and psychological test failed to bring any solution to the situation, the Warrens were finally called in. The Warrens were gaining popularity as a paranormal aid and had already worked on several cases. The activity ranged from low-level poltergeist activity to this aggressive physical demonic attack stuff. Apparently one night while trying to recite the Hail Mary to make the possession stop, Maurice became so violent he even tried to choke out his own wife. The Warrens made the decision that this was not a normal haunting but a possession and would need the help from Bishop Robert McKenna, who agreed to perform an exorcism. After examining Maurice, Bishop McKenna performed the ritual right away. Dude, that's terrifying. He's just staring off like a reptile. Apparently the demon identified itself simply as, quote, "I am what I am." And also, of course, invoking the kingdom, referring to demons from the legions of evil type stuff. The exorcism was successful, thank God. A young French-Canadian character appears in The Nun, and is supposedly loosely based on the real Maurice, who the Warrens actually think might have been possessed by the devil himself. What do you think? Number 5, The Conjuring. The Conjuring is a 2013 horror film directed by James Wan, written by Chad and Carrie Hayes. It is the first film in the Conjuring universe franchise and also based on real events surrounding the PERRON family's demonic experiences. Ed was a World War II vet and a former police officer who became a self-professed demonologist. Lorraine, a self-claimed clairvoyant, making them the best demonic duo out there. In 1952, Ed and Lorraine founded the New England Society for Psychic Research. They quickly gained notoriety as respected investigators after this case. The Perrons. In 1971, the Perron family moved into a 14-room farmhouse in Rhode Island where Carolyn, Roger, and their 5 daughters began to notice odd things happening almost immediately. First, missing items, salt shaker, broom, then some ghostly sightings. Then, well, you'll see. It was discovered that the home had experienced some previous sinister owners, self-immolation, deadly accidents, and of course, murder in the attic. One violent and destructive spirit named Bathsheba. Quote, "Whoever the spirit was, she perceived herself to be the mistress of this house, and she resented the competition of my mother posed for that position." Andrea Perron, the oldest daughter. Bathsheba Sherman, who lived on the Perrons' property circa 1800s, was rumored to have been a Satanist and involved in the murder of a neighbor. According to the oldest daughter, Andrea, there were numerous spirits that lived on the premises. The smell of rotten meat, beds levitating, and of course, the dirt-covered, abysmally cold basement. The Perrons asked the Warrens to come in more than 10 separate times on 10 separate occasions to help out their ghost problem. Lorraine conducted a seance to attempt to contact the spirits that were possessing them, to which during the seance Carolyn Perron was possessed. The family swear that she was speaking in tongues and even rising from the ground, sitting in a chair. Andrea said, "My mother began to speak a language not of this world in a voice not of her own. Then her chair levitated and she was thrown across the room." Yeah, that's all the ingredients you need for an amazing horror movie universe to me. Terrifying. Number 4, The Haunted. In 1991, the works of the late great Warrens was finally approached again after years of their demonic work had slowly and surely began to surface. They began fighting the good fight since the 40s, remember? With the success of the Amityville horror in the late 70s and the popularity it brought to the demonology topic within the US, the Warrens' name and reputation was finally appreciated, and they gifted us another gem of a story to film. This 2-hour, made-for-TV film based on the horrific events that took place within the SMURL home in the 80s. The Haunted, released by 20th Century Fox, earned itself 2 Golden Globe nominations. The case file of the SMURL's haunted house in Pennsylvania in the 1970s was infamous for not only demons, but a certain type of evil entity, the incubus and the succubus. This demonic pair usually haunts a sleeping person, and their possession is usually based around a more explicit manner of haunting. Yeah, Google it up, you'll get it. This film does a semi-tasteful 90s job at expressing what the SMURLs were actually working with. Spoiler alert, it's pretty messed up. Demons almost quote-unquote breeding with those it possesses. The SMURLs version of their story was the subject of a 1986 paperback book titled The Haunted, of course, where this movie of the same name gets its inspiration from. The Warrens are introduced and explored for the first time in this film. Like many of the film adaptations, the Warrens are first seen performing college lectures into various hauntings. Lorraine is portrayed by Diane Baker. Ed is played by Stephen Markle. A pretty 90s feel to it, you know? Grainy, it's a little campy at times, but it's the first formula to this huge film franchise. Isn't it cool that Ed and Lorraine have been part of the modern horror scene for like 70 years? Their cases have been a part of the horror landscape way before Juan developed his Conjuring universe. Whether you believe in these cases or not, it's clear that they've made an impact. Number 3, The Haunting in Connecticut. The Haunting in Connecticut is the first of the Warren universe of horror and is based on all real cases and points. A 2009 gem, it accounts the horrific paranormal case of the Snedekers, who moved into a ghost-infested house in Southington, Connecticut. Carmen and Alan Snedeker, their 3 sons, their daughter, and 2 nieces, all unwillingly now pray for the other side. The eldest Snedeker son unfortunately was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, and the family moved to Connecticut to be closer to the doctors. What they weren't initially aware of was that the home they were renting was once a funeral parlor. Yeah, tools and bloody furniture just lay as they once did, untouched. Mom notices items going missing. That's just the start. The children start to see strange people in their home at night, specifically a man with long black hair. Their son's drastic personality change, which included violent outbursts and attacks on his family, was then diagnosed with schizophrenia. No one was convinced, though. It was agreed that maybe he was becoming a victim to the house's grim history after all. After weeks in the home to get the full demonic experience, the Warrens came to the conclusion that the morticians that worked on the home previously had practiced some abysmally sinister acts on the lifeless bodies, deepening the home in a twisted, dark origin. After Ed and Lorraine were called in to clean it up, an exorcism or 2, and the house finally became a home again. The case can be reimagined in 2009's Haunting in Connecticut, where the story follows the truth the Snedekers experienced all those years ago. It's pretty scary, yeah. Number 2, The Nun. The 2018 spin-off film and prequel to The Conjuring 2. A demon nun channeling an evil spirit named Valak. The Nun serves as an origin story of sorts within the Warren universe. Sister Irene and priest Father Burke travel to investigate a monastery in 1952 Romania after the Vatican learns of an accident and summons the father to investigate. According to the Lesser Key of Solomon from the 17th century, Valak is the Grand President of Hell. Valak's look in both films were inspired by an experience Lorraine had shortly after investigating the Amityville horror house in 1976. Lorraine was at home in her bed reading when she felt a presence. She saw a black whirlwind of dark mass enter the room. It was like a vortex. Lorraine prayed to be released from the forces of evil. She told it, "Leave and go back where you came from," over and over again. It vanished, but she never forgot. And cue scary movie. Yeah, apparently while investigating the once very haunted Borley Rectory, the most haunted spot in the UK, Lorraine had a run-in with a sinister nun. They ended up coming face to face with the churchyard's ghost, who was, according to lore, a nun buried alive behind the brick walls of the convent centuries ago after having an affair. Apparently Ed took photos on his camera of the Borley Rectory ghosts as they encountered them. Quote, "It was pitch black and there were no lit candles or lights. Photographers snapped photos on a 35mm camera with infrared film. When they developed the images, what appeared to be a spectral nun was seen walking down the aisle praying." And number 1, part 2, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. Sounds like a lame Satanist excuse, doesn't it? Actually, now a term of phrase pleaded before a court of law. Yeah, who knew? Could possession under demonic circumstances prove innocence over acts performed while under? This is the 8th installment of the Conjuring universe. The plot is as follows. It's 1981. Ed and Lorraine documented the exorcism of 8-year-old David Glatzel, attended by his family, his sister Debbie, her boyfriend Arn Johnson, and Father Gordon of Connecticut. During the exorcism, Arn invites the demon to enter his body instead of remaining in the boy's. The family, including the Warrens, witnessed the demon transport itself from David's body to Arn's body while he suffers from a heart attack and is taken to the hospital unconscious. Arn and Debbie return home, but Arn is left feeling a little unwell and eventually ends up murdering his landlord, stabbing him 22 times due to this demonic possession. Yeah, sounds pretty terrifying, doesn't it? His case becomes the first American murder trial to claim demonic possession as a defense. Well, sorry to break it to you, but this is literally a play-by-play of the events that actually happened. Yeah, maybe not shot for shot, movie style, but the script and skeleton was there for sure. Arn was subsequently convicted after a messy murder trial, though he served only 5 years of a 10 to 20 year sentence. The case was huge. It attracted huge media attention and in fact was the first in history of the US claiming the paranormal as a defense. The couple went on to marry each other, and tell their story as the Warren side as well. Books, documentaries, and eventually this huge film universe. Yo, all of this just got way more scary, right? Like, I gotta rewatch all 8 parts. Who am I kidding? I'm not gonna watch them. I watch horror movies like this, you know?